Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. The White House announces President Biden will soon meet with Russia's leader. What do they hope to accomplish, and what's not up for debate? The Democratic leader of the Senate brings the January 6th commission bill up for a vote, but the chamber's top Republican calls it a purely political exercise. And we'll tell you what Trump has to say about the lawsuit alleging he is responsible for the Capitol breach. Some parents and doctors sue the Department of Health and Human Services for approving CCP virus vaccines for children. They say the children are more at risk from the vaccines than the virus. The Florida governor's office says students in the state will learn about racial discrimination despite the state's ban on teaching critical race theory. They say they'll do it by focusing on historical facts instead of ideology. The Federal Aviation Administration downgrades Mexico's airlines. Mexican authorities say the downgrade will hurt them in dealing with growing demand as lockdowns ease. A sheriff's spokesman says multiple people have been shot and killed at a California rail yard in San Jose. Some escaped the shooting with injuries, but the deputy says the suspect is dead. Law enforcement hasn't said how many people were wounded or died, but we do know that among the victims are employees of the Valley Transportation Authority. President Biden is expected to meet with Russia's president next month in Switzerland amid escalating tensions between the two countries. NTD's Jessica Beatty has more.
Mr. Vladimir Putin, Mr. President.
President Biden is set to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin next month in Switzerland. It'll be at the end of his first international trip as president. The White House confirmed the summit Tuesday.
We're not suggesting that at the end of this that is going to be easy breezy from here. In fact, we continue to expect that we'll have difficult conversations, but this is an opportunity to move toward a more stable and predictable relationship with Russia.
Since entering office, Biden has imposed sanctions on Russia, expelled Russian diplomats, and agreed with a news host that Putin is, quote, a killer. Russia's foreign minister recently said ties between the U.S. and Russia are worse than during the Cold War.
There's nearly no chance for improvement, but predictability and stability, which means, that the sides agree on how they act and not disturb each other. I think that's what's going to happen.
The Kremlin says they'll discuss bilateral ties, problems related to strategic nuclear stability, and other issues. The analyst says Putin likely won't make any concessions on some topics, including Russia's conflict with Ukraine over Crimea and letting the U.S. join the Donbas peace talks.
There are some red lines that are not to be negotiated. That obviously Crimea, most likely Donbas. Probably the United States would want to change the format of the Donbas peacemaking process.
It'll be Biden's first in-person meeting with Putin since entering office. They're set to meet on June 16th in Geneva. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer readies a vote on the January 6th commission. A key moderate Democrat supports it, but the GOP leader Mitch McConnell calls it a purely political exercise. Here's more.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on Tuesday moved to force a vote on the January 6th commission bill. The chamber's majority whip said the bill may be on the floor this week, but it depends on the amendment process. The bill passed the House, and Schumer was expected to take the first step to move forward on it Tuesday night. At the same time, the Senate is considering a China competition bill that may take up a lot of floor time. Schumer comments on the Innovation and Competition Act.
It'll allow the United States to outcompete countries like China. It'll create millions of good-paying American jobs. It will help improve our country's economic and national security.
The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says the commission is a purely political exercise and says it wouldn't add anything to the total sum of information. McConnell told reporters, "I think that a part of this recommendation by the Democrats is that they would like to continue to debate things that occurred in the past. They'd like to litigate the former president into the future." Two moderate Democrats came out in support of the commission, Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. They are requesting their Republican colleagues work with them to examine the events of January 6th. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial, said Tuesday that she also supports the bill. That brings the current Republican support to 3 senators, as Romney and Collins supported as well. The January 6th commission bill would need the votes of 10 Republican senators, which is unlikely given the GOP's opposition to it. For the first time, former President Trump has formally defended his actions regarding the Capitol breach. Through his lawyers, Trump declared he has absolute immunity over the breach and argued his statements he made while president are beyond the reach of the court. Trump's lawyers called on a federal judge to dismiss the lawsuit against him, alleging Trump bore responsibility for the breach. California Representative Eric Swalwell filed the lawsuit. According to Axios, Swalwell was the target of a female Chinese spy. NTD contacted Swalwell's office for comment, but didn't hear back immediately.
The Department of Health and Human Services faces a lawsuit over giving CCP virus vaccines to children. This as some teens were hospitalized for heart inflammation following a vaccine. The self-described nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization America's Frontline Doctors is suing the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They are trying to prevent the department from approving CCP virus vaccines for children. Some parents have also joined the lawsuit. America's Frontline Doctors released a statement announcing the lawsuit. Citing CDC statistics, the statement says that 99.997% of patients under 20 with COVID-19 survive, and more than 4,000 deaths that have been tied to the administering of COVID-19 vaccines in the last 4 months, as opposed to 1,500 total in the previous 10 years for all vaccines. The group's pediatric medical doctor, Dr. Angelina Farella, says we've never seen this level of side effects for any vaccine without the FDA taking action. The FDA expanded the use of Pfizer's vaccine to children as young as 12 on May 10th. According to the CDC, 2.1 million children between 12 and 15 have had a CCP virus vaccine. Last week, the CDC said it's investigating reports of heart inflammation in teenagers and young adults who received the vaccine. 18 teens and young adults in Connecticut were hospitalized for heart inflammation after receiving a vaccine. The doctors group statement says researchers are concerned that spike proteins from the vaccines could cause disease themselves or increase autoimmune disorders. The Biden administration indicates that they plan to move ahead with vaccines for children. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says their experts still support vaccines for children between 12 and 15. She says, obviously, the risks of contracting COVID are certainly significant, even for people of that age. An attorney representing America's Frontline Doctors says there is no public interest in subjecting children to an inoculation program in order to protect them from a disease that simply does not threaten them. Pfizer says it's evaluating its vaccine for children 6 months to 11 years old. Cities and states are giving out incentives for people to get vaccinated, but there are some who aren't likely to change their mind about the vaccine in the near future. A group of people gathered nearby Pfizer's New York City headquarters Tuesday to protest against mandatory COVID vaccinations. They're concerned about possible adverse effects. The demonstrators told us the vaccine should never be mandatory, saying it's up to individuals themselves what they put in their bodies. They were especially worried about vaccination for children. In the U.S., everyone over the age of 12 is now available to get the shot, and in New York, it could soon be mandatory for public school students. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says he wants to make Florida a national leader in civics education. His office explains that children will be taught historical facts rather than ideology.
Press Secretary Christina Pushaw of the Florida Governor's Office tells the Epoch Times that Florida is taking further steps to make sure critical race theory, or CRT, is not taught in the state's schools. She says critics of Governor DeSantis that claim children won't be taught anything about racial discrimination are wrong, adding that it will be done by teaching facts instead of ideology. She cites the example of the state's racially motivated Ocoee Election Day riots. That's when white citizens attacked and massacred over 30 black citizens on the day of the 1920 presidential election. It's known as the deadliest political riot in American history. Pushaw says that DeSantis signed a bill mandating that the incident be taught in schools because the Ocoee riots are a historical fact. She explains, civic education can acknowledge dark moments in our nation's history while rejecting the premise of CRT, that America is a fundamentally evil, racist country. Pushaw says the CRT ban will include the state's community colleges and state-funded colleges along with K-12 schools. She also noted that Florida Department of Education would release more details on the plan. Keith Flaw directs an education advocacy group in Florida. He tells the Epoch Times that simply banning CRT isn't enough. He says the textbooks Florida is planning to buy for next year are full of CRT. Pushaw says Governor DeSantis is still considering what to do about textbooks. She says she'll have details on that in the coming weeks.
The governor of Tennessee is also taking similar action. He signed a bill that prohibits teaching 14 concepts related to critical race theory in public schools. He has said schools should teach the exceptionalism of America and not things that inherently divide people. Republican lawmakers in Arizona voted to limit the powers of Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. Hobbs, a Democrat, has been critical of the Maricopa County election audit. Advocates say the audit is critical to restore voters' confidence. The state's House and Senate Appropriations Committees granted sole authority to the Attorney General for all election-related litigation. The votes also bar Hobbs from hiring private attorneys with taxpayer money. That's after legislators revealed that Hobbs filed a complaint against Arizona's Attorney General with the State Bar Association. In some cases, she hired her own outside attorneys, but billed the state. Hobbs says the legislature is trying to prevent her from doing what voters elected her to do, and that she's being singled out for partisan political purposes. State Senator Vince Leach told Capitol Media that Hobbs' attacks against the Attorney General are unprecedented and uncalled for. In order for the changes to take effect, they would have to be approved by the full Arizona legislature and signed by the governor. A Connecticut state senator and a former Board of Education official surrendered to the U.S. Marshals Service in New Haven. They face federal charges for allegedly trying to obtain tens of thousands of dollars in campaign grants. Dennis Bradley Jr. was elected to the state Senate in 2018 and served as the Democrats' deputy majority leader. Jessica Martinez was his former campaign treasurer and was the former chairwoman for the Board of Education in Bridgeport, Connecticut. An 8-count federal indictment charges both Bradley and Martinez with conspiracy, wire fraud, and making false statements to get nearly $180,000 in campaign grants. They pleaded not guilty, and Bradley was removed from his Senate committee assignments. According to the Connecticut Post, Martinez was removed as chairwoman, but still serves on the board. Bradley was released on a bond of $300,000, and Martinez was released on bonds of $250,000. A technology company that assisted in the Maricopa County, Arizona ballot audit has departed. The state Senate president says the firm completed its obligations under their contract. The contract with Wake TSI ended on May 14th, and the Pennsylvania-based firm chose not to renew the contract. The news comes as workers in Maricopa resumed their audit of 2.1 million ballots cast during the election. Officials say an Arizona-based tech company called StratTech Solutions has taken up the audit. It will continue to use Wake TSI's hand count processes and procedures. On Tuesday, the United States downgraded Mexico's aviation safety rating. It's an action that bars Mexican carriers from adding new U.S. flights and limits the ability of airlines to carry out marketing agreements with one another.
Mexican Airlines will be barred from adding new flights to the United States after the US downgraded its aviation safety rating on Tuesday. The US Federal Aviation Administration said it would increase scrutiny of Mexican airlines, but also offered expertise and resources to resolve the issues. Mexico was the most common international destination for US travellers last month. But now the FAA has downgraded it from Category 1, which signifies compliance with international standards, to Category 2, the lowest level. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has urged US authorities not to downgrade the country, arguing it was compliant. The president of the country's air transport chamber, Luis Noriega, says the downgrade means Mexican airlines will not be able to meet growing demand, particularly after the health crisis. The FAA downgraded Mexico for about 4 months back in 2010. Only a handful of countries are currently rated Category 2 by the FAA, including Bangladesh, Pakistan, Thailand, and Malaysia.
Coming up, the cell guards on duty the night billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is believed to have committed suicide are given 100 hours of community service. And a judge dismisses the indictment against one-time Trump advisor Steve Bannon. The decision considers former President Trump's pardon of Bannon. Find out more here on NTD News. The two cell guards responsible for guarding ex-sex offender billionaire Jeffrey Epstein will have to perform 100 hours of community service as part of a deferred prosecution deal. The two guards were supposed to check on Epstein every 30 minutes, but they failed to do that on the night of Epstein's death. He was already on suicide watch at the time. The two are accused of falsifying documents to conceal their failure to conduct scheduled rounds. The billionaire pleaded guilty more than a decade ago to 2 felony prostitution charges. That was in a deal that federal judge later determined violated victims' rights. Epstein was arrested again in 2019 by the FBI's Crimes Against Children Task Force on sex trafficking charges. New York's Public Transportation Authority, the MTA, has almost 6,000 buses in its fleet. Today, they announced the next step to make them all electric buses by 2040.
The main reason for the MTA's shift to electric buses is to save the environment. They also say traditional buses pollute the air and can contribute to illnesses like asthma.
Today we're announcing the next electric bus purchase to be awarded last year will be increased from 45 to 60 buses, a one-third increase from what was previously planned.
Lieber says the MTA transports 40% of all people who take public transportation in the U.S., and that they are already doing so in an environmentally friendly way. Not only buses will be purchased, but also charging stations.
NYPA will be installing more than 50 state-of-the-art overhead chargers to power these new electric buses. The chargers will be in 4 depots across the city, and in one case, there'll be one of these chargers on the street, so the buses could be charged during the driver's rest periods.
According to Markowitz, transitioning to an entirely electrical fleet is like installing an AC in every bus back in the day.
If you go back a few decades, like hardly anybody had it. It slowly phased in, right? And the power companies just dealt with it, built out the infrastructure to support it. So the same thing's really true with the electrification of fleets, right? It's going to be a 15-year window.
Right now, the MTA operates 25 all-electric buses, and the current program includes $1.1 billion in funding to buy another 500.
A new bill aims to help New York City's homeless population move out of shelters. It would increase the city's housing vouchers from about $1,600 to $2,200 per month. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
When an individual or a family becomes homeless in New York City, they're able to move into a shelter and apply for a special voucher after 90 days. It's called a Family Homelessness and Eviction Prevention Supplement, or FEPS voucher. The recipient can then use the FEPS voucher to help pay rent. But according to Councilmember Stephen Levin, only about 20% of City FEPS voucher holders are able to get an apartment over the course of a year. One woman has been living in a New York City shelter for 2.5 years. She has been looking for an apartment the entire time.
With that voucher, I didn't realize it was limited to the 5 boroughs. I thought I might be able to move upstate. They were like, no, you have to stay in the 5 boroughs. And I was like, wow, there was nothing in that voucher amount that's available.
Roughly 50,000 people currently live in New York City shelters. But city officials at the event said there were less than 600 apartments in New York City that someone could move into with a FEPS voucher. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson said passing this bill will increase that number significantly.
That number's going to go from 564 to 72,000 apartments. Oh.
Christine Quinn, the former Speaker of the New York City Council and current president of a shelter provider, Win NYC, said the bill will help thousands get out of shelter and that it'll save the city over $100 million over the next 5 years. This bill, 146, is expected to help the lives of many families currently living in shelters. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson said the bill is expected to pass after a vote on Thursday. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
Steve Bannon, the one-time strategist for former President Trump, wins dismissal of an indictment. He was accused of defrauding donors who contributed to build the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. The judge handling the case in Manhattan said the dismissal was the right decision in light of the pardon Bannon received in the final hours of Trump's presidency. Prosecutors argued that instead of dismissing the indictment, the judge should just dismiss Bannon as one of the 4 defendants. The others were charged in connection with allegedly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars from a $25 million crowdfunding campaign. The judge said the presidential pardon was valid even if Bannon did not formally admit guilt. It's not clear how the dismissal will affect Bannon's co-defendants. Still to come, truckers in California fight to continue working as independent contractors instead of employees. They say California's gig worker law doesn't work for the trucking industry. And restaurant owners in California will get busy soon as the state will reopen completely on June 15th. That and much more coming up on NTD News.
I'm a member of American Home Shield, which means this faucet may be freaking out, but I'm not.
Something's wrong with my AC. It's blowing pretty hard and it won't turn off. Luckily, I'm a member of American Home Shield. My plan helps cover the cost when parts of more than 20 home appliances and systems wear out. If they can't repair them, they'll replace them.
I've never felt so good.
For a free quote, go to ahs.com. That's ahs.com.
With the Brinks Money Prepaid MasterCard, it's easy to manage your money.
I get a text alert every time our card is used, so we always know our balance.
And we're protected from unauthorized transactions. Brinks gives us peace of mind.
Introducing the Brinks Money Prepaid MasterCard. With direct deposit, you can get your paycheck or government payments up to 2 days faster.
Brinks knows what's valuable to me: time.
Load money onto your card and then shop online. Pay bills. With Brinks, you can conveniently manage your money online and with the mobile app. Call now or go online to get your Brinks Money Prepaid MasterCard. And in this TV-only offer, personalize your Brinks Money Prepaid MasterCard with your photo for added security. Brinks knows what's valuable to you. Call right now to order your Brinks Money Prepaid MasterCard.
Call 1-800-823-2156.
Or go online. Call now.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
James Bond is getting a new home. Amazon is buying MGM Studios, home of 007. The deal will cost the tech giant nearly $8.5 billion. MGM is one of the most iconic movie studios in history. Its library catalog includes The Wizard of Oz, Rocky, and Legally Blonde. The deal is subject to government approval. This comes as the media industry is consolidating. Just last week, AT&T announced it was spinning off Warner Media to create a new company with Discovery Plus. The California Trucking Association is fighting a law that'll force truck drivers to be classified as employees. The group says the law, if also applied to owner-operators, may reduce pay for truckers and increase prices for consumers. NTD's Colin Fredrickson talks to people involved with the matter.
California law may soon force truck drivers to be employees instead of independent contractors known as owner-operators, causing them to lose huge amounts of income. Lawyer Gregory Feary works with the California Trucking Association.
But maybe more importantly, by eliminating or substantially reducing the possibility that these truck drivers can run their own businesses, the law, AB 5, robs them of the right to be entrepreneurs, to start a business, to build a business.
The law, Assembly Bill 5, makes all companies classify any person who works for them as an employee rather than an independent contractor, with limited exceptions, intending to protect workers. While this makes sense in other industries, for trucking it may raise costs and lower incomes. The California Trucking Association is currently fighting the law in court.
The California Trucking Association is the party that remains the aggrieved party. It's almost certainly going to appeal to the United States Supreme Court.
The vice president of JKC Trucking, one of America's largest refrigerated trucking companies, is concerned California will lose even more drivers. There currently already exists a driver shortage.
It's unfair, owner-operators have been around for a very long time. You just can't take away this kind of classification, especially if it's worked for so long.
In the end, higher costs trickle down to the consumer, harming the American people. Kucharski says around 70% of goods have at some point been in a truck.
Truck drivers deliver everything except babies. Truck drivers is a super key to the supply chain, to the global chain, imports, exports. It's extremely key, to keep these trucks going.
It may be up to the Supreme Court to ultimately settle the matter. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
On Friday, California announced it is on track to fully reopen in 3 weeks. Restaurant owners are relieved by this, as they can see to full capacity and diners have a chance to get back to life as normal again. Here's NTD's Eileen Ng with more.
Restaurants and customers alike are seeing hope as California's full reopening date on June 15th nears. Freddie Rodriguez, assistant general manager at Holder's Mission City Grill, says people are happy to come in because they feel like it's starting to feel normal again.
Just like today, I saw two of my regulars that used to come in almost, 4 times a week, and they just came in for the first time ever since the pandemic started. I was happy. I was like, you guys are actually sitting down inside instead of doing just to-goes. So they were like, yeah. I'm like, this is awesome. I can see new faces and old faces now.
The family-owned American restaurant in Santa Clara has been around for over 50 years. Like many restaurants, they started doing to-goes when the pandemic first started. Rodriguez tells NTD it was tough and they received calls asking if they would be able to survive. But they were confident they would stay open no matter what. With the restrictions easing now, they are doing much better.
Some people are still uncomfortable going inside, it's okay. We still want people to be careful. So people still eat outside, especially during the weekend when it gets busy inside.
Johnny McGrew, co-owner at Mio Vicino in Santa Clara, said they reopened in June 2020 for outdoor dining. Right now they can seat patrons at 50% capacity inside.
Some customers they're tired. They're tired of the restrictions. They're tired of wearing masks. But most people understand, that we have to keep safe. But most of our customers have been very supportive.
Overall, people are eager to get back to something closer to normal, he said. McGrew added he won't be mandating his guests to wear masks, but the cooks and servers will still have masks on. The lockdown caused the Italian restaurant sales to drop about 75%, and they also relied on to-go. It has been around since 1992.
During the time we were only doing takeout, some people even just came and bought gift certificates and didn't want to take them. They said, you guys can do whatever you want with them. We just want to contribute, to help you guys get through this.
For some customers, it has been a while since they have dined outside.
Feels good to be sitting under the sun. So we have good number of vaccinated cases now. We have been vaccinated as well. So I guess probably in the next 6 months or so, we should be back to normal.
We were always fond of outdoor dining, so this is kind of a win-win situation for us. Good to be back out and enjoy a warm pizza rather than taking it home and eating it up again.
As business is booming again, restaurants face staffing shortages. Owners and managers say people are not applying for those jobs and they cannot find enough employees to keep up with the reopening timeline. Eileen Ng, NTD News, California.
An ancient treasure trove has been unearthed in California. That's where hundreds of prehistoric fossils have been recently uncovered. A ranger naturalist with the East Bay Municipal Utility District first discovered them last July. One of the fossils was a mastodon from about 10 million years ago. The tusks of the prehistoric elephant took 130 hours to dig out. They were so big, it took 8 people to load them onto a truck. The fossils are now being studied at California State University, Chico. Just ahead, Republican Senator Josh Hawley set on holding the CCP accountable for its role in the pandemic and its forced labor camps. He's introducing several amendments to an act that challenges Beijing's growing global influence. And Chinese police are holding an anti-terrorist drill, but the terrorist is not a person carrying a bomb, rather it's a protester with a sign. More on that in a moment on NTD News. Republican Senator Josh Hawley has introduced several amendments to an act that challenges Beijing's growing global influence. He says Congress can't miss this chance to begin fixing years of bad U.S.-China policy. His amendments focus on holding the CCP accountable for its role in the virus and ending corporate reliance on slave labor in China. Here are the details.
U.S. Senator Josh Hawley introduced 7 amendments to the United States Innovation and Competition Act. This piece of legislation that challenges Beijing's growing global influence has largely gone under the radar, but it's one that's uniting lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Senator Hawley's amendments include imposing a duty of 100% on goods made in Xinjiang, a region notorious for slave labor and other human rights violations, requiring a label marking items imported to the U.S. from countries believed to produce goods made by forced or child labor, requiring certain companies to monitor and disclose the use of forced labor in supply chains, and requiring the Director of National Intelligence to declassify information relating to the origin of the CCP virus. Other amendments aim at protecting intellectual property rights and data security. Hawley says Congress has a chance to begin correcting 2 decades of failed policies that allowed China to thrive at the expense of America. He wrote, "That means putting American workers first, ending corporate reliance on Chinese slave labor, and weaning Wall Street off their dependence on the Chinese Communist Party. That also means holding the CCP accountable for their role in the outbreak of the pandemic in Wuhan. We can't let this opportunity pass." Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Monday that he's optimistic the act will pass by the end of the week, but it's not yet known if any senators will object to Hawley's amendments.
More updates on China's deadly ultramarathon race. 21 victims lost their lives due to lack of resupply, and reports are coming out that resupply points during the race were 6 miles apart. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
Reports are still flowing in from China's Gansu province. A disabled runner there is dead after participating in an ultramarathon race over the weekend. Wang Guanjun was a Paralympic Games champion, winning the men's hearing-impaired marathon in 2019. But despite his success, he was known to keep his aspirations humble. Chinese media report that according to his friend, Wang came from a poor family, often using his competition winnings to support his parents and keeping little for himself. For every race he won, competition prize money meant earning several $100s to help them. Wang was one of more than 20 competitors who were killed in the ultramarathon. The extensive race turned deadly when temperatures in the region plummeted and harsh winter weather set in. A group of 5 runners were among the lucky ones, saved by local shepherd Zhu Keming. Zhu first realized something was wrong when he heard cries for help nearby his cave shelter. He soon discovered the athletes, immediately bringing them to shelter inside and lighting a fire. The shepherd later explained that this kind of weather is common. Another marathon runner survived thanks to an unusual method that kept him alert. As the severe weather conditions set in, runner Wang Jingming was soon chilled to the bone. He said he tried everything to keep himself awake, fighting the cold while waiting for rescuers. He explained he began to lose consciousness as temperatures plunged. At first, he used his dwindling strength to pinch himself, an effort to keep himself clear-headed. But soon he could no longer feel his arms and legs. By then, he started to bite his tongue and his lips, later recalling that the pain kept him alert and reminded him that he had to survive in order to see his family again. He was rescued sometime later. Event organizers first realized something had gone horribly wrong just 3 hours after the race began. That's when the race's WeChat social media group started flooding with messages, many containing cries for help. Like several people have lost consciousness and urgent help needed. Some survivors later described wind conditions as so strong they couldn't stand, while others reported their thermal blankets were shredded by the conditions. More details about China's deadly ultramarathon race are beginning to emerge. According to U.S. media Radio Free Asia, or RFA, official corruption may have had something to do with the tragedy. Extreme weather conditions hit during the race on Saturday, and 21 professional runners lost their lives due to a lack of resupply and assistance. Authorities blame the weather, but a source reveals to RFA that up to 30% of the race's income had to go to the local official in charge as kickbacks. The source says there is no public bidding for this year's race. Rather, the local Chinese Communist regime propaganda department directly appointed a man named Wu Shiyuan to organize the race. Wu runs a company with only 20 employees, yet he somehow manages to operate almost all marathons in a local city. The source says on top of the 30% kickback, Wu has to pay at least $5,000 to the local official in charge in the name of instruction and certification. Ms. Wang from the China Mountaineering Association tells RFA that such an event will need at least a 500-person support team, but Wu had only 9 people. And each resupply point is over 6 miles away from each other. That is extremely dangerous for runners. Wang also says it is common in China for organizers of similar events to cut manpower and basic supplies. That's because they need to pay kickbacks. The Chinese regime appears to consider protesters terrorists. Beijing's Public Security Bureau held an anti-terrorist exercise at a major shopping mall in the city in mid-April. And they said the terrorist in this drill as a worker protesting to get his wage. CCP mouthpiece CCTV aired the exercise and posted the video on its website in April, but they soon deleted it. In it, viewers can see an actor entering the mall holding a sign that says, "Pay me my hard-earned money." And he was shouting the same line. The actor then knocked down a security guard with his sign. CCTV said the so-called terrorist committed an armed assault and it caused chaos. As part of the drill, many security guards and public security officers armed with riot gear arrived and subdued the man. It is common in China nowadays for employers to delay paying their workers, partly due to the economic downturn. In some cases, workers can't get any wage for even a year. That's why many workers have protested to demand their wage. And Chinese riot police often respond to such protests. Chinese netizens say setting a protester as a terrorist is unique to China. Many suspect that the so-called drill was to intimidate Chinese rights defenders and activists. A comment on Twitter says, "Which fool will go to the shopping mall to ask for wages? This is a show for people to watch, telling you not to cause trouble, or they will arrest you if you do so. There are audiences in the mall." Some think this is outrageous, saying people can't get paid working their jobs, and they even get classified as terrorists. Is it reasonable not to pay?
Coming up, the UK has banned Belarus's national carrier from its airspace following the forced landing of a Ryanair passenger jet over the weekend. And 3 people have been arrested for a cable car crash in Italy. The accident killed 14 people and injured 1 child. Stay tuned to find out more.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate co-pays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month.
I called to get dental, transportation, meals, and the Give Back benefit.
With this virus situation, I called to get everything I'm entitled to. I couldn't believe I was missing out on so many benefits.
With the uncertainty of the virus, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
The UK has said it will ban Belarus Airlines from its airspace, and EU leaders agreed on new sanctions on the country. This comes amid fury over the forced diversion of a passenger jet to arrest an opposition journalist.
The UK has banned Belarus' national carrier from its airspace. This after Belarus authorities forced a passenger plane to land in an incident denounced by the EU as state hijacking. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab made that announcement on Monday in Parliament. When asked by an SNP lawmaker about possible Russian involvement in the incident, he responded,
"But as he says, it's very difficult to believe that this kind of action could have been taken without at least the acquiescence of the authorities in Moscow. But as I say, it is unclear as yet."
He called the incident a shocking assault on civil aviation. Raab added that Britain is requesting British Airlines cease flights over Belarus. The Belarusian authorities on Sunday scrambled a fighter jet and forced a Ryanair plane to land in Minsk. Belarus says it acted in response to a bomb threat on the flight, which turned out to be a false alarm. They then detained a dissident journalist who was on board. Roman Protasevich on Monday appeared in a video acknowledging having played a role in organising mass disturbances in Minsk last year. His father said he believes his son was forced to admit guilt.
I think he was forced. It's not his words. It's not his intonation of speech. He's acting very reserved, and you can see he is nervous. It is very likely that his nose is broken.
Russia, which provides security, diplomatic and financial backing to Belarus, dismisses any involvement. EU leaders on Monday agreed to impose more sanctions on Belarus, including economic ones, and they called on their airlines to avoid the former Soviet Union republic's airspace.
And Belarus used its control over its airspace in order to perpetrate a state hijacking. Therefore, the safety and security of flights through Belarus airspace can no longer be trusted.
The EU has a travel ban and an asset freeze in place on 88 Belarusians, including Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and 7 companies. It's over Minsk's crackdown on protests following a contested presidential election last year. Human rights groups say about 35,000 people have been detained in Belarus since August over the protests. EU leaders demand an immediate release of the journalist.
3 people have been arrested over Sunday's cable car crash in northern Italy, which killed 14 people and left only a 5-year-old boy alive. Police said the emergency brake was deactivated.
3 people were arrested on Wednesday over a weekend cable car crash in Italy that killed 14 people, leaving a 5-year-old boy as the sole survivor. The safety brake mechanism had been deactivated, police told Reuters, and prosecutors have opened an involuntary manslaughter and negligence investigation. The emergency brake had been kicking in repeatedly and stopping the cable car working as it should, a provincial carabinieri chief told Italy's Rai broadcaster. On Sunday, it failed to engage at all, and the gondola slid backwards, apparently hitting a pylon, before it plunged to earth and rolled down a steep slope. The owner of Ferrovie Motorone, the company that manages the cableway, its director and the manager of the cableway were arrested. The cableway connected the town of Stresa, on the shores of Lake Maggiore in northern Italy, to a nearby mountain.
Croatia has opened its stunning Adriatic coastline to tourists after a year of pandemic lockdowns and restrictions. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
The mood is relaxed in Ravine, and masks are scarce on this part of the Istrian Peninsula. It's part of the northernmost part of the Croatian coast, and is famous for spectacular beaches and thick pine forests. Hotels and restaurants are preparing for the start of the main tourist season in June. Croatia was one of the first European countries to drop most of its pandemic travel restrictions.
Well, it will be definitely a challenging year in front of us, mostly because of the pandemic situation. So as Croatia heavily depends on tourism.
New infections are dropping, and officials there predict that about 50% of the nation's 4 million people will be fully vaccinated by mid-summer. But the tourist season's success will depend highly on the regulations and quarantine protocols in tourists' home countries.
The tourism sector has started with vaccination. All the employees of the hotels, restaurants, also private accommodation are getting vaccinated so they can be safe for the tourists.
The European Union is in the process of launching COVID-19 certificates. Officials said the system should be up and running by July 1st. That means European Union citizens can make summer vacation plans within the bloc's 27 nations without having to worry about quarantines. The European Commission said the certificates will be issued in digital form and are designed to be shown on smartphones. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Still to come, an official partner of the Tokyo Olympics calls for the Games to be canceled. The message asks Japan's Prime Minister to reassess the situation. And the White House voices its support for the Tokyo Olympics and American athletes despite a travel advisory. We hear from residents in Los Angeles as they react to the news. All that and more in just a moment. Another sign of trouble for the Tokyo Olympics. One of the official partners of the Games is joining the calls for cancellation. This time in Japanese national newspaper Asahi Shimbun.
An official partner of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics called for the Summer Games to be canceled in an editorial on Wednesday. Japan's Asahi Daily, one of Japan's most prestigious newspapers, published a piece calling on Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga to, quote, calmly and objectively assess the situation and decide on the cancellation of the events this summer. They further cited the Games' risk to public safety and potential strains on the medical system. The editorial was widely shared on Japanese social media and garnered more than 30,000 tweets by late Wednesday morning. Several polls have shown that the majority of Japanese people are opposed to holding the event, which draws in tens of thousands of athletes, officials, and spectators. Doctors' associations have already protested holding the Games, along with some business investors. Other media sponsors have yet to chime in. Much of Japan, including host city Tokyo, remains under a third state of emergency that is widely expected to be extended beyond this month. Although Japan has been spared the ravages of overseas nations, it has struggled to control a fourth wave of infections. The U.S. earlier this week issued an advisory against travel to Japan, but still stood by the decision to hold the Games as planned.
The White House on Tuesday reaffirmed its support for the Tokyo Olympics this summer. That's as Japan copes with a rise in virus cases and a new U.S. travel advisory. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
For public officials, athletes, and fans, the Tokyo Olympics have been a contentious issue during the pandemic. In Los Angeles, residents weighed in on whether or not the Games should go ahead.
Well, the thing is, though, actually, Japan is not mostly vaccinated, so I don't know if it's very safe for the Olympics to happen at this point. I've seen lots of things about that, and I feel that, in my opinion, I feel that Japan needs to be vaccinated more before this can happen.
Monica Martinez had bought tickets back in 2020 for the Games. Despite her eagerness to go, she says the event should be postponed.
I think the best thing for the country of Japan and then for globally, for athletes and everyone, unfortunately, would be to postpone them. It's just for everyone's safety. I think that's the best thing.
The State Department issued a do not travel advisory for Japan on Monday. That's prompted by a fourth wave of virus infections there. The U.S. advisory and guidance for Japan did not mention plans for the Olympics, scheduled to start on July 23rd. But they did warn against visiting the country for now.
Yeah, I think the Olympic definitely should go on in Japan, especially I've been to Japan many times, and it's the country, everything is perfect.
Japanese officials have said they don't anticipate any effect on the Games because of the travel advisory. Japan has delivered vaccines to just under 5% of its population. It's the slowest rate among the world's larger, wealthier nations. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
On this segment of Strong Mind and Body, we look at a range of foods that can help combat cancer.
In order to treat cancer and make sure there is no recurrence, it is very important that the body be brought into a state of balance. The immune system must be rebuilt, so how is this feat accomplished? Detox, 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 and achieve a slightly alkaline pH. Fill your body with the best organic, nutritionally dense food available. Your goal is to rebuild a killer immune system as you bathe every non-cancerous cell in your body with nutrition. Here are some specific foods known to eliminate cancer, starting with the omegas. Omega-3, oily fish, fish oil, flaxseed oil, hemp oil, and healthy oil blend supplements. These provide omega-3 fatty acids and other beneficial fatty acids also. These fight inflammation and make the body less hospitable to cancer cells. Vitamin D is also known to kill cancer, and you may find many fish oils and some vegan oil blends with vitamin D in them. Let's look now at cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, watercress, kale, collard greens, bok choy, turnips, radishes, and arugula. These vegetables contain helpful compounds which help fight tumours, breast, prostate, and brain cancers, as well as leukemia. Next on the list is berries. Black raspberries appear to reign supreme, though all berries contain cancer-fighting phytonutrients which inhibit tumor growth. Also, what about mushrooms? Maitake and shiitake mushrooms. Mushrooms boost immune function and are a great source of antioxidants. They are also rich in vitamins C and B vitamins, as well as calcium and other minerals. Next up is turmeric. Turmeric inhibits the spread of cancer, along with its anti-inflammatory and oxidative effects. Turmeric can be found at farmers markets and supermarkets in root form. Next is tomatoes. The active compounds found in tomatoes are very helpful, especially in the fight of prostate and pancreatic cancer in men. 7 to 10 helpings a week are suggested, both cooked and raw juice. To gain the health benefits of juice, make your own. Store-bought tomato juice will be pasteurized. Next is folate. Egg yolks, avocados, apricots, green leafy vegetables, and pumpkin are among the foods rich in folate. For meat eaters, chicken livers are very high in folate. Folate, or folic acid, is essential for the body to correctly replicate DNA. Let's look at garlic. Even the National Cancer Institute admits that garlic may reduce the risk of developing several types of cancer, especially cancers of the gastrointestinal tract. Garlic reduces inflammation, fights free radicals, and fights cancer. In closing, an alkaline balanced diet with plenty of nutrition and as few toxins as possible makes the body inhospitable to cancer. Sugar feeds cancer. Processed and refined foods feed cancer. Raw organic vegetables, especially when grown for maximum nutrient content as opposed to large-scale farming, should be the foundation of any healthy diet.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.